What is up to all the difference makers out there? This is going to be a really, really different episode. So it's so funny. I've had so many guests on that have called me and tried to cancel or shot an email and said they're not ready to go on. And I take pride in pushing people out of their comfort zone to come on and tell their story. And so here I am today, and I had this idea. And we're on episode. This is going to be episode 78. And through 77 episodes, the last few episodes, it dawned on me that through these 77 episodes, there's been a commonality. There's been several commonalities through people's stories that we've shared and just nuggets and tips to success. And so I went down and I jotted down just several of the things that just keep coming up and reappearing. And I thought, you know what? I have never had an episode by myself. This whole podcast experience has not been about me whatsoever, and not that it has to be about me, but I think it's a good opportunity to sit back at episode 78 as we've made so many changes, so much progress over the last few months, and really reflect on where we're going, what Coffee and Grit is, what would be who's a good listener, and what you get out of this, and I guess what the whole entire intention is. So if you're waiting to pan away to another guest like normal, you're in the wrong place today. I hope you're not here for an amazing guest, because you're going to be stuck with me all day. So that said, I started this podcasting journey. I started about 4 years ago, and I did a series of videos with a gentleman that I met, another coach that had this really crazy story. And it was just a way to create content. He was somebody that had an impact on me, and we worked together for a few months, just doing some very rudimentary videos and posting them on YouTube. But what really, really started this journey was really starting my business, Roar Consulting. And I am a person that I want to succeed. And I know that tip number one, people are our greatest resources. We can learn more from people than any other resource out there. And we're living in a time where there's just an infinite amount of resources. You can really literally learn how to do anything. When I first started my business, I didn't have any money. And so I had, but my car's brakes were grinding, and I was at a point where I needed new brakes, new rotors, new calipers, everything. And I unfortunately have had that experience where I had to pay somebody to do that big job before. And so I knew how much it was going to be. I started researching online, researching the parts. I found some videos online on how to repair brakes. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to tackle this myself and not pay someone else to do it. And I did the whole entire job myself. You can find out how to do anything. You can read any book. You can find any how-to on YouTube. However, you don't sometimes know what you're looking for. You don't know what you don't know. And that's what people come along, and sometimes people see in you things that you don't know that others see in you. And that it took a person to change my life. It took several people to come along and change the way I thought, change my trajectory in life, because I was going nowhere really, really, really quickly. And so all that to say, I had realized this principle in life that it takes people. And so starting my business, I don't know the first thing about starting a business, about running a business, about running a consulting business, putting together services and packages. And so who can I learn from? Other coaches, other consultants, other business owners and entrepreneurs that have followed in my footsteps. And so that was one of the first things I did. The very first thing I did is I went and I hired a coach that knew how to do things that I needed to learn how to do. And so that really set me up. And then that guy actually introduced me to a bunch of networking groups in which I got to get out and meet a lot of people, and see who was kind of the movers and shakers. And then I went through and just would sit down with people and invite them to coffee and ask them questions. Why did you get into business? Why do you love doing what you're doing? What excites you? What challenges have you faced? What didn't you know then that you wish you did? And what would you do differently? What would you do more of? I just wanted to know and know what was going on so I could kind of understand and pick their brain and apply some of the things to my life. And what was happening was a metamorphosis. And I was able to take this information and apply it. And it wasn't just changing my perspective and helping me grow a business. It was helping me see a lot of things differently, helping me look at life differently, helping me become a better father, better husband, just a better overall person. And at the same time, I was also working in my space to grow my brand. And so I was like, I've got this instant content. I was watching a lot of Gary Vee on social media, and I would watch how Gary Vee would sit down and have conversations with just about anybody. The intern, he would have conversations with just, fans or just people, his right hand person. He'd have all these conversations, and he'd just record them. And I'm like, I'm going out and I'm having these conversations with these phenomenal people, and at the same time, there are so many other people that are not like me, that are not going out there and having the conversation, that are trapped in maybe their vulnerability or their pride that I've got to go out there and I've got to do it all on my own. Or they think that they're going through problems and challenges that nobody else has gone through. And so they're stuck in that vulnerability. They're stuck in that scared feeling. And they don't ask for help. They don't pick other people's brains. And it's a lonely, lonely world out there. There's 90% of businesses fail in the first 5 years. And of that 10% that's left over, the other 90% fail in the next 5 years. So if you think about that, there's a lot of failure out there, but there's also a lot of people that are just not getting out of their own way and finding the people. And so what do I have to say to that? Because you can sit and say, you know what, I just don't have the friends. And Jason, that's great for you. You probably knew a lot of people. You were in the business world. I was in the business world, and I felt like I had a lot of imposter syndrome because was in a space where I was in retail, and I was very, very successful in my industry, but not a lot of people knew me outside of my industry. So I could go to a convention or a conference anywhere nationally in my industry and people would know me, but nobody knew me outside of that space. And so I always question, who am I to go and work in these other spaces? And also another thing I didn't want to get trapped in is I didn't want to go out there and get stuck consulting other companies in my space and then just end up with another job. And so I cut ties with my industry altogether. And I went out and I just met new people. And so one of my greatest, and just tying this up with people, your greatest resources, one of my greatest, I guess, things I did or greatest assets is the relationships and the people that I know. I've started my business 4.5 years ago. In most of the people that I surround myself around now, most of the people that are the outside of my immediate family, my best friends, my best relationships, I did not know existed 4.5 years ago. So if you're sitting right now at home in a space where you're like, that's great, Jason, but I don't know the people are out there. And there are so many people out there that want to help. There really, really is. There are people that want to help. There are people that you can learn so much from. And that's what I hope to bring with Coffee and Grit. And I've realized this has been a selfish adventure because I get a couple of things that really fill my bucket. One, I get to have entrepreneurs and these difference makers. People out that are on this show are absolute difference makers. They're making a difference in people's lives. They're making a difference in just their communities. They're making a difference within their families. And so I have these absolute difference makers on, but a lot of them have not had an opportunity to tell or share their story. And so they get to go out now, and I provide this experience, this platform where they can tell their story, share their experiences. And then the really, really awesome thing, and this is the next step, is that there are so many gold nuggets within a story. About a year ago, I was reading the book, The Power of Vulnerability by Brene Brown. And she said very early in the book, a quote that really stuck out to me, because this is the quote that I've really been searching for a long time. And when she said it, it just clicked. She said, "Stories are data with soul." And it's so true. And so just in my businesses, I'm coaching people and I'm helping them get out of their comfort zone and get out of their boxes and thinking what sales is and really understanding how they serve people. I ask them to tell me a story, because if I ask them what they do, how they help people, those are questions they get all the time. It's usually in the box answers that they just give everybody. If I ask somebody, tell me a story about your favorite client, what happened, where'd you meet them, where were they at when you met them, what was going on in their life, and what has happened since, why are they your favorite? And there's so many answers within those questions, and I'm able from those stories they tell help them understand who their ideal market is, who the right fit client is for them, help them understand what pain points, have clarity around what problems they're solving. And then we can go through and reverse engineer and create a strategy of communication to intentionally engage these people. And so there's so much more. That's just the tip of the iceberg from the information that you gather from these stories. But it's the same thing. And I hear it in the people's and the guest stories that we have. And again, I'm going over these nuggets that I've gotten out of all of these stories that are all hidden within they're hidden gems. So the point of this as a listener is you're listening through, understand these stories. There's so much data in here for you to go through and pick and weed through, and it's a success leaves clues. There's a roadmap in here that you can follow. And I know, again, I've learned and grown so much that it's so incredible. And again, that selfish reason. So I get to help these people share their stories, get a spotlight on what they're doing, provide them a platform where maybe for the first time, people are getting to hear their stories and their vulnerabilities. But then their information, their stories, they tie back and come back to the audience because they're going through, the people that are listening to this are going through exactly the same things that the people on our show are going through. So it's that pay it forward, just a constant give back. And so, and then on top of it, just since May, being able to come in here at Speakeasy Podcast Studio, downtown Brighton, outside of being able to give my guests an experience and a platform to share their story, they get this whole experience of coming in with the professional equipment. My guests and my listeners get to hear a much higher audio quality. And I've gotten so much feedback at how important that has been. So again, that's tying back to people. Without meeting people and going out and putting myself out into new relationships, that is, that doesn't exist. Going back in just another story about people, I've shared this story about writing a book in a couple episodes and becoming a bestseller. And this is, I think, just to circle at home and talk about the power of people. So I met this lady on LinkedIn about 2 years ago and had a conversation with her. We really, really hit it off. She's now 72. She lives in Illinois and we talk every week. I do a podcast over Zoom with her every Tuesday. We've never met in person, but she's one of my closest friends. And there's a whole crazy story of our relationship and how people have just been connected. And so I had her on my podcast here on Coffee and Grit, Barbara Ellison. For listeners, you can go back and listen. She had me on her podcast. And then one day she came to me and she said, "Hey, I do a podcast with my best friend, Pat. Would you want to be on?" And I had a busy day that day, and I said, "But I can probably squeeze it in. I'd love to. Let me get in." So I was running a little bit late, and then my technology wasn't working, and I was not able to get in and join their podcast. But I was able to listen, and they invited me out to be a guest on for the following week. And I listened to the podcast, and Pat and Barbara had a great connection. And I was able to comment through, they had it on Facebook Live. And so I was able to comment through and join in the comments. And I was really looking forward to that next week being on with Pat and Barbara. And then that Saturday, I got a message from Barbara that Pat was driving home from a doctor's appointment with her mom on the expressway, and a car was coming down the wrong way and they hit head on, and Pat was instantly killed, and that Barbara was no longer going to do this podcast. Which of course, you're not going to go on and do a podcast after your co-host and best friend was tragically killed. And then a few days later, I got a message from Barbara that she asked me. She said she had a dream the night before that Pat came to her and asked her to do the podcast episode and asked if I would still come on the show. So of course, I came on the show. We had a great episode, did a great tribute to her friend, and then she asked me if I would come on and do another episode with her, another couple episodes. Well, she found a full-time co-host because she didn't want to do the show by herself. And so I agreed, but she asked me, would you find a guest for us? Now, I've never met this lady. She lives in Illinois. Still to this day, we've been friends for 2 years, and I've never met her. And I thought of two people that I could bring on as a guest. For some reason, out of all the people that I know, I thought of these two people, a client I was working with and still work with, and then a friend of mine down the street in Ann Arbor named Dan McPherson, who I have been on his podcast a couple of times. He's also been a guest on Coffee and Grit. And so I, as I'm going to message Dan, who lives 15 minutes down the road from me, and as I'm about to message him, I get a message from Dan, and Dan says, "How in the world do you know Barbara Ellison?" In the Venn diagram of things, how do you know her? Because apparently Dan has been in a online virtual meditation group with Barbara for the last several years, and it knows Barbara very, very well. And so think about that and how people are so connected, and how when you are finding the right tribe, you know you're on the right path because so many people know each other that you would never, never, never in a million years think are connected. And so I was able to surprise Barbara, our first show that we did, with a guest of somebody that she knew. And it was a really cool, special moment. So you think about these connections with people. Barbara then connected me with a lady named Regina. Regina had an idea to come together with a mastermind group of other consultants from all around the world because she had all these connections with a phenomenal marketer out of England, with the guy who does people from all over, all walks of business, and honestly, it was mostly women in their 70s. And so I'm in this group with the man from Australia, myself, and six ladies in their 70s from all around the world. And we meet once a weekly, or we met once a week, and we would talk about our businesses and how we can help each other and how we can help each other grow. And we would mentor each other a little bit with the different things that we did, our superpowers, and help each other in our businesses. And then one lady one day is a writing coach, and she's also authored 54 books. And she said, "You know what? With our superpowers and the collection of things that we've been able to talk about and do in our businesses, we should write a book. And I'll help you guys write that book." And now it was my bucket list. It was a goal my whole entire life to write a book. Again, I say people are our biggest difference makers because I've had that on. I can't remember my first initial memory of wanting and desiring to write a book. I had a desire to write a book. My desire to write a book was so strong, and instead I started a business. And believe me, I'm happy that I did that, but it's something that I never did. And so this person came along, this group of people came along and gave me a vehicle and an opportunity to write a book. And not only did we write this book, but it went on to become a bestseller on Amazon. And I would love to tell you that I worked really, really hard writing this book, that I worked really, really hard promoting it and getting it off the ground and selling it, but that's just a lie. I did not work very hard. I wrote the chapter, and as a collaborative unit of 8 people, we all put in a little bit of work, and it just so happened that all of us had different experiences and different followings that we were able to become a best-selling book on Amazon in entrepreneurship and business in 2 different categories. I started starting a small business for over a week without feeling like I was overstressing this. People were asking me, "How hard are you working?" Not hardly at all, because it's the power of people. And when you're collaborating and you're working together, it changes your life. Something else I've mentioned, and I've mentioned, and you've heard it over and over and over again if you're a listener, but the power of vulnerability, and it's in the stories like we were just talking about. The power of vulnerability, vulnerability. So many people, so many of us, and even myself, have been in these moments where we look at that vulnerability as weakness, but then we admire people that have lost over and over and over again and have found a way to win, or that have shared their dirty secrets and have been, have shared their soul to show people that there is a way out of it. We revere those people, yet we run from being those people. Isn't that so interesting? The other day, I was having a conversation with a friend and somebody that I see as very successful in business. I don't just see her, she is very, very successful in business. She's an in-demand consultant, in-demand speaker. And I said to her as we were sitting and having coffee, "I would love to have you on my podcast, Coffee and Grit. I think you have a lot to share." And I don't even know her whole story. I was about to learn. And she said, "That's awesome. However, there are things that I'm uncomfortable talking about." And I said, obviously, everybody listening to the podcast knows, tell me more about that, because that's what I want to talk about. Those things are so uncomfortable you don't want to share with other people, because those things are the things that are going to help other people. Being able to get on that, be uncomfortable and get past it, that's healing. That's moving past. All right. So she went in to tell me this incredible story. And I'm not going to share the story or the details or who this person is, but she went on and shared this incredible, incredible story that I would have never pictured this person came through just a couple years ago. And I'm like, that story is so motivational and inspirational. And I would have never thought, again, I don't think anybody that knows you thought that you've been through that. And so not only can you, I don't want you to be a guest on my podcast until you're ready to share that story, because that story needs to be shared because other people need to hear that you've been down, that you got kicked around, that you had this experience that you don't want to share with anybody else, because there's somebody else right now going through that experience that's not moving forward, that thinks that they're a loser, that thinks that they're not worth it. And so share your vulnerabilities. I talked about my friend Barbara, obviously you hear a lot. And Barbara always says, if you've been through it, if you've thought about it, if you're living through it right now, you've got to share it, because somewhere in the world, somebody else is going through that same thing right now. And they just need to know that it's possible to get by it, to get through it. And so that's the biggest motivation for Coffee and Grit from the beginning. Like I said, I was hearing these people's stories and I'm like, wow, I didn't know. We have that comparison model on us all the time. We look at Facebook and we say we're not good enough, or we're not enough, right? But we have no idea what other people are going through. A few years ago, I had this, my son had this friend that invited him over to a birthday party. And we pulled up at this person's driveway and their house was just ginormous, just huge. And I'm like, wow, they have so much. It's almost like embarrassing. Like I'm dropping my son off. Like, wow, what did they do? Right. And you sit and you compare yourself to people like that. And as I got to know this person, I realized life is not always like happy. And just because you have one thing, other things are falling apart. And so my point is we all have things that we're afraid to tell people. We all have things that we're ashamed of. But most of the time, in my experiences, those things are our greatest gifts. I'm working with a gentleman right now that sees his limitations that have been put on him his whole life, or something that he was diagnosed with, and that he carries with his whole life as a limitation. However, he's going out there and he's made it his biggest difference, and he's growing something that's going to become so successful because of these things. And all it takes is someone coming along and seeing that and believing in you, that can absolutely change your life, because nobody else is pointing that out to you. And so share those stories and just be ready to be vulnerable. What is happiness? I noticed that all my guests have figured out in what makes them happy, what drives them. In entrepreneurship, a lot of us get into this because we want the flexibility and freedom, and then we realize we're doing this by ourselves, and it's hard to have that flexibility and freedom. We got to work all day, or like we don't take that time. We can get really caught up in time and money, or in the money and the things that we need. It's very, very important before you start a business, before you really go do anything worth doing. Define, what is happiness to you? When I started my business, I knew that I wanted to be able to be done with work by 5, 6 o'clock at the latest, because I wanted the opportunity to be there when my son got off the bus. I wanted to be able to coach his sports. So I knew I didn't want to work on the weekend, because weekends were for family time. Sundays were, family time. And so I really defined, I define happiness to me. I came out of a sales director role where I was driving all over the state of Michigan, and I love my community of Brighton, Michigan. And so when I started my business, I wrote it down. Happiness to me was being able to walk to work, was be able to walk from my house to my office, or to the things that I do. And so literally I created that. So I created that into reality. My office space is a 3-minute walk from my house. I'm at the podcast studio right now. That is literally a 3.5-minute walk from my house. So I'm able to do things locally and enjoy my downtown, be a part of my community. I was at the bank earlier. I don't know why I'm so emotional right now. I was at the bank earlier, and they make a big deal when I walk in the bank. I almost get like this wrestler announcement when I walk in. And they were talking about that, and I said, there's a couple people that left the bank that don't, so I don't get that kind of announcement anymore because the people that were doing it are no longer there. And so they were asking if I miss that, and I said, I'm this person. I'm an extrovert. I love the energy from people, but I'm a Gemini as well. So I love my alone time. I could I cherish that time that I could spend 4 or 5 hours by myself, and it may not be enough. And so I'm kind of split both ways. And so some days, yeah, I love being in the podcast studio, or I love being hyped up. I love being out in the community and people seeing me. And then there's some days where I'm like, oh crap, I hope nobody sees me. Right. And so, but to me, again, from a young age, I wanted to be a pillar in the community. I wanted to be able to go down the street and to people to see me. And so I've been able to define that and create that. If you don't know what makes you happy, why are you working so hard to get there? And I see so many people, whether I'm coaching them, whether they've been on this show, so many people that have learned in life that we work so hard to get to a destination that was somebody else's idea of success. We had Zach Beeson on last week, and Zach had no apologies to drop out of school, no matter if people told him he was a loser, he was a failure, he was going to be homeless. He didn't care. He just moved forward. He knew he was going to be successful, and he was going to find a way no matter what. That's no apologies. He knew what was going to make him happy. He knew and he started to make success and build his business around what made him happy. And, that's just such a big differentiator. So first thing, right now, define what is it that makes you happy? Is it time with your family? Is it time in your business? Is it your passion? And are you doing, or do you have an opportunity to turn your passion into a business? My life is so happy. It's not always happy, right? There's bad things that happen. I get that. There's bad stuff that happens every day. There's sad times just like everybody else. However, I am so happy and I'm living a successful life because I get to wake up and do what I love to do every single day. I get to empower businesses. I get to empower people that they're not going to be in that 90% of people that are out of business, right? They get to working with coaches and consultants, literally empowering them to see that sales is actually pretty fun. Serving people is amazing. That's what they're doing already. And if they can just switch that perspective and see sales in a different light than what they've ever experienced it, and they can understand how to believe it, how to communicate it, how to tie it all together to be consistent, and they build a business. Wow. This is a reverse cycle, because the conversations I was having with people in coffee shops, the number one thing that I realized, I'm so happy that I've been in sales, because so many people have the magic keys. They're so much more talented and successful and better coaches than me, but they're having a hard time selling themselves because they've never been through that experience. So again, it's being able to empower those people changed my life and keeps me happy. I define my life and my business and in what keeps me excited. And if you listen into the guests, you'll find that they found something that keeps them happy. They've defined what is success to them. And that is why they're on the show a lot of times. Do the work and discover yourself. A few episodes ago with my wife, Gracie, I talked a lot about the immaturity and triggers that I had to go through in order to really have a good relationship. There were things that she was doing that was making me mad. There were things in life, just even recently, I found, this is a couple months ago, and this was actually Brian Truskowski, one of the guests. I went through this 2-week period where I just felt myself getting agitated and mad, really, really easily. And I wasn't sure what the common denominator was. And then one day I'm driving around and I could feel myself tension rising. And then I remembered a quote that Brian Truskowski said in his episode here a couple months ago. And he said, whenever we tie results and expectations to time, we set ourselves up for failure. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. Wow, the trigger is every time I'm running late. Every time I feel like I'm running late or I'm running out of time or I'm on the expressway and there's a traffic jam and it's holding me up, or we're in a meeting and all of a sudden we're not talking about something we're talking about something that I feel like is wasting time, and I'm getting agitated. I found my trigger was all around revolved around the expectations of time. And just again, thinking of these nuggets and these stories, that was something that just came out of Brian's mouth. I've since messaged him and been like, thank you for that. And it was just something random. I don't even know how I remembered it, just out of the blue. I could hear him saying that quote, and it helped me realize my trigger there was that expectation in time. And now I can sit and like, as I could feel myself getting tightened up, is that feeling still there? Yes, but now I can deal with it. Now I can get myself calmed down and realize that, oh, I'm repeating this cycle again. So do the work, understand what is triggering you in what makes you happy. Outward mindset. So I see a common denominator with the people that I have on, or just successful people in general, is that they think about other people. They think about, how can I serve and help other people? And there are a lot of people that I talk to, especially in sales, that are super successful, that say to me, I suck at sales. I think you've heard it from all the different salespeople that I've had on this podcast, that they believed at one point, or still believe, that they're not great salespeople. But all it comes down to is they have servant mindsets. They have a servant heart, and they want to help people. They want to solve problems, right? And so that is such a huge, huge, huge key, is being outward and knowing that the most important people are the people outside of you. Who is this person across from the table? I think Coffee and Grit has had the success that it's had so far because it's all about this other person sitting across from me. And I've been on podcasts where it was obviously the host show. And hey, that's awesome. I'm obviously doing a solo show right now, but I didn't feel great as a guest. I don't know how much the viewers got out of it, because I felt like it was a lot of just self bravado. And I hear that even in some of the bigger podcasts out there, that you know what, it's a lot of self bravado. This is 100% me learning another person. And a lot of times these people don't even know what stories they're going to tell. People ask for questions from me. This is the thing though. I find the magic is in the everyday and in the vulnerability. And that is not stuff that people are willing to put in their show notes. I love getting that moment where somebody's kind of caught off guard. And I've had that several times in the show. So it's all about that other person. Anybody that knows me and has listened to me understands my mindset as far as eat faces. And again, last week, Zach said this, was talking about this and really relating this home. And he's talking about dropping out of school. He was talking about being ADHD and how he's a very hyper person. And so change and being, kind of being all over the place, that suits him. Being an entrepreneur suits him. He knows it's not for everybody. Being an employee does not suit him. Being at school did not suit him. And so he understood his what was his strengths, and he saw them as strengths. He saw them as his superpowers versus seeing them as limitations or challenges. And it was a moment that just gave me a chill instantly, because it's like that, I think, is a big difference in whether you're happy or whether you're unhappy. Is how do you see your vulnerabilities? How do you see your challenges? How do you see your superpowers? Are you spending most of your time thinking about what sucks or what you can't control? And we think about a couple years ago during the pandemic, and I saw so many people focusing on the things they couldn't change, on whether the shutdown was going to last, or on whether, arguing politics, and just there's so much focus on things that they couldn't change, and there's so much uncertainty already, and so people were going kind of crazy, and there was a lot of just, anger out there, because that's what happens when people have uncertainty and people are wrapped up in negativity. I was living a completely different world, building relationships and friendships with completely different people. And there'd be people out there that would tell me, oh, the world's a horrible place. But it's not, because there are so many people out there that are not focused on the problems, that are not focused on the challenges. They're not focused on the things they can't control. There are always going to be things we can't control. Is life perfect? Absolutely not. Things are going to happen. Challenges are going to happen. But you guess what? The only thing we can control is our attitude and the way we arrive, the way we show up, the way we understand and look at this challenge. For me, going into the pandemic, I'm like, oh shit! Like I'm a small business that serves small businesses, and half my clients were shut down. That they didn't have a business that was was making money any longer, and so they couldn't pay me. And so I'm sitting there like, oh, what's going to happen to my business? In going through that little bit of a pity party, and then I started getting in my outward mindset of thinking like, people need me, right? Like, if there are people out there and they're struggling, and there are people that are ready to, they're panicking and they're ready to jump off the proverbial bridge. That's what I help them bring, is that clarity and that strategy. And so I'm going to go out and I'm going to pour out into as many people as I can, as many organizations as I can. I'm going to get on LinkedIn. I'm going to build as many relationships with people as I can. I just put in the work. I'm working on other people, serving and taking care of other people. And it was a trying, nervous time. I wasn't making good money at all. And so I'm sitting there trying to figure it out and navigate it as well. But it's like, well, how can I pour into other people? Where's the beauty in this? And if it wasn't for that pandemic and thinking about it like this, I would not be in business today. I would be back at a job. However, the clients that stayed on, every single one of them, I poured everything I had, because I don't have any other clients I'm working with. I had a small group of clients. And so I was able to pour everything I had into them, and every single one of them had better businesses in 2020 than in any previous year. And a couple of them had their best years in the previous year. So that it felt amazing that not only can I, talk the talk and walk the walk during good times in good economy, but when things are unpredictable, when there's chaos, when there's no money, I can help people figure it out. And so that gave me a lot of confidence. Also, going out and helping people and having that mindset of serving other people, it built my brand. It helped me build equity and help me build trust relationships with people. It wasn't a show. That's who I am, right? That is my mindset. And so that's what I went out to do. And I wouldn't be here behind this microphone right now talking about this if it wasn't for that experience, right? And so where's the bad? Or when you see bad, where's the beauty in it? Where's the opportunity? Eat faces. And so if you don't know my Eat Faces story by now, it is all about thriving in spite of the circumstances, because there's always circumstances. And, when I started as a director of sales for this company, that they were bankrupt, millions of dollars in debt, financial restructuring. In any kind of financial debt company, you're going to see also a bankrupt company in culture. And through really quickly, we were able to start rebuilding this company. And over the course of 9 years, not only did we pay off all the debt, we were able to become cash flush, which allowed us to grow our organization faster than any of the other organizations in our industry, while maintaining a high level of success. And we eventually won Franchisee of the Year across our organization nationwide in 2016. And I had my leadership team down with me, because I always thought it was important to take my leaders out to events where they were able to grow their mind. Mindset is everything. And so going out and being around the president and the CEO of the franchise, owners of other successful companies, being able to pick people's brains. And so they came out with us, and they were able to celebrate when we won Franchisee of the Year. And we were out celebrating with all the top executives of the company and a lot of other owners from the franchise. And there's this one particular owner named Eric that had attached himself to me and was telling me about all the reasons why he wasn't us, why he was not successful, why he wasn't the Franchisee of the Year. See, the economy had sucked. He had taken over his business during the recession. And at the time, the franchise, they told him they were going to help him be successful, and they were going to help him become a good business owner, and they're going to give him all these resources. And you know what? They never came through to him, so they failed him. They suck. And the carrier, they only care about you if they're hitting numbers. The vendor, they only want you to hit numbers, and if you're not hitting numbers, they don't care about you, and they don't give you any resources. And my people, they only steal from me. And it was just excuse after excuse, or reason after reason. And I got tired of it because, again, I have this mentality that it's eat faces. And I told him, hey, listen, I'm not saying you're wrong. I validate your reasons. I understand. I started in my role with this company, millions of dollars in debt during the recession as well. I also, the franchise, as we joined the franchise and we're restructuring our company, they also told us the same things, that they were going to give us all these tools and resources and they were going to make us successful. However, I know at the end of the day that nobody cares about whether I'm going to eat. Nobody cares about whether Jason Tracy is going to be successful or that Debbie, the owner, is going to be successful or we're going to grow this fruitful team more than me. So at the end of the day, I know I've got to take responsibility for myself. And so, you know what? The vendor, the franchise, they weren't there to support us, but we went out and we made it work. The vendor, do they only care about you if you hit numbers? Yeah, they do. But you know what? They don't make the numbers rocket science. They put them right there. They're right there for you to see. They know, and they tell you exactly what you want to hit. So you know what? I went out and I game plan and I crushed those numbers. And guess what? Not only do they give me the support in every resource that I need, but they also give me cash incentives that they don't give you. And you know what? It all comes down to it. Like, how do you look at it? Are you taking personal responsibility? Because it's nobody else's responsibility to make you successful. At the end of the day, I'm a lion that eats faces. When it comes down to whether I'm going to eat or my people are going to eat, I'm going to eat. And that's just the end of the day. And you know what? That stupid little eat face is saying for probably would have just died, but I had my whole leadership team there and we're in this loud bar in Chicago. And I swear to God, it was like the music stopped and everybody in the bar heard me screaming at the top of my lung, I eat faces. And it became a thing. It actually became the rallying cry for our company. We had a better year the next year. And then when I left the company, I got the leaders of the company got together and they got this book and they put pictures in it and had paragraphs of stories of where they were when I met them. And they said at the end of the day, we're now face-eating lions because of your mentorship. And it meant the world to me, but I would tell my clients about this and it became a mantra, just explaining the origin of eat faces. And because when I came home and I told my wife about this story and I said eat faces, I almost had to sleep on the couch that night because it sounded so graphic and so violent. But it is all about, at the end of the day, we're all handed adversity. How are you going to, how do you arrive? What do you do with it? How do you turn that into gold? Because you can. And if you don't know how, go back to the people, find the resources because they're there. The last thing is communication. I think every guest I've had on has been a phenomenal communicator. And I can tell you what, I've worked in companies that have been, let's say maybe even just, it's not even a bad thing, or you wouldn't think it's a bad thing. Maybe people that are not confrontational. They don't want to have a confrontational situation. And so they go out of their way to avoid that confrontation. Does anybody know that kind of person in their life? Here's what happens. That actually creates a whole bunch of confrontation. When you go out of your way to avoid confrontation, what that looks like is a lack of respect. It looks like you're lying or you're shady. You create and you silos, especially if you're running a company, you're a CEO or you're running an organization. You're creating silos because you don't want people within your organization to argue or fight, and so you're not telling truths of what's going on, or you're keeping them separated and not allowing communication to happen. If you're in relationships, we talked about, again, episode of me and Gracie, like understanding. What is this other person's perspective? What do they see? For Gracie, when I'm dreaming and I'm visioning, and I'm on top of this world, she sees how are we going to get there, and starts asking me questions. That'd be normal, great communication. However, we also have to kind of meet in this road and understand why are we having this communication. Having communication and what does effective communication look like? You know what? I think it comes down to any message can be fine. How did it come? What state was it in? And what I mean by that is, do you have a heart at war or do you have a heart at peace? Are you seeing somebody, for example, if I'm seeing Gracie as somebody that nags at me, or somebody that when I have good ideas, she hates on them. If I see her from that point of view, and when I have this idea, or I start telling her about a dream of mine, and she starts asking me questions, and I see her as somebody that is nagging me or that is a dream killer, how am I going to respond to her? I'm going to respond to her like she's a dream killer. I'm not going to have a positive reaction, right? Now we're at a point in our relationship where I understand that Gracie's coming from a point that she wants the best. She wants the best for me. She wants the best outcome for my dream. And so she's asking me questions with a heart of peace. When we were younger in our relationship, even though she may have had the best intentions, she was coming at it from looking at me more as an object or somebody that she wants to help change it, versus seeing me as a person and where I'm at in my struggle. So she's giving me advice, but not from a standpoint of, she knows I'm probably going to have this. She doesn't know, outright, but she knows I'm probably going to have a little bit of a backlash because of where she's coming from. Now I understand that perspective, and it just makes the communication much different. A good example, if anybody follows sports, Tom Izzo at Michigan State. You look at this guy and he's yelling and he's screaming, and he looks like he's headbutting players. And there's been times where on TV they've replayed these situations with his players where it looks like he's downright getting violent in their face, and people have questioned whether he should be coaching or whether he should be disciplined for doing this. And every single time the player comes to his defense and says, I came here to be coached by this man. I came here knowing how he was. The difference is, from him yelling or having that boss that is just an asshole that's yelling at you and is screaming at you in your face, whether it's a boss, whether it's a coach, whether it's a spouse, that's just yelling at you and telling you you're not doing it right, or those people look at you as an object that is there to perform. A boss, for example, why are you not hitting the numbers? What is going on with you? Those are questions that are more or less like, you're making me look bad, or we need you to hit these numbers. You're an object in my place, or in that place. Now, Tom Izzo, the reason why he gets away with what he does and why his players respect him is because they know at the end of the day, he loves them. He wants the best for them, right? And so when you have that understanding versus, I want to win games, I love you as a person and I want what's best for you, and I want what's best for this team because I have a commitment for this team, or you have a commitment to this team, versus we need to win games. It's a total different way of communicating. Words, people look for words. Words don't matter. How are you saying it? And that's why do I say words don't matter? If you ever gotten a text message from somebody and you got mad, and then they're like, why are you mad? I just asked you how your day was going. You read into what you thought they were asking you. You thought maybe you had a guilty conscience. Maybe the last conversation you had with them was negative. Maybe, whatever it is, you have this negative impression in your mind. And so when you get a text from them, you read it negatively, and they're just asking you how your day was. So it's all about that communication. How are you doing it? Had a conversation with somebody the other day, and that just at the beginning of the conversation, he saw this certain person as somebody that didn't care, didn't have respect, that was not a high performing person. And by the end of the conversation, after I was able to shed some light onto what that person's been through, not from a poor me standpoint, but from just being able to catch up what's going on and why what they're saying is not the truth. It changed the overall just relationship period. All of a sudden the messaging and the communication gets completely different because I now have an empathy for this person. I now see them in a different light, and I know why they're responding this way. That doesn't mean that you put up with their shit and you allow people to talk to you a certain way, but you can now understand how to communicate with them, right? If you have somebody that, and talking to Wally Bressler a few weeks ago, if you have somebody that hates themselves, Somebody that doesn't feel like people are around for them, or doesn't feel like they have the best luck, and you're scolding them and coming down on them or threatening their job, you're playing into their weaknesses. They're never going to respond to you that way. And so it's so important to communicate and understand and know who your people are, whether it's your people, your family, your friends, your coworkers, your employees, your collaborative partners, all of your relationships. It's so important to have that high level of communication. So I hope you all were able to get a lot out of this episode. Again, just tying in how do you listen and watch Coffee and Grit? And some of you have been listeners for a while. Some of you, maybe this is your first episode. And if so, I want this to be a great start for you to understand how you can go back and listen to those past episodes and how you can view these episodes moving forward. So, man, go out there, take this wisdom and just go out there and be the difference. Just go out there and crush it. And always let us know what you think and what you have for us for this episode. So, all right, everybody, go out there and crush it.